Have you ever been hungry? And I don't mean just the, we're a little late for lunch kind of hungry, but that kind of hungry that comes when you open the refrigerator and the only thing you can find is a jar of mayonnaise. When you find this one roll sitting there next to the microwave and it's green and fuzzy, and your first thought is, that's probably healthy. They make penicillin out of that stuff. You know that kind of hungry? I've got to say that in my life I've been fortunate that hunger has been a transitory thing. Those days when at the hospital the lunch break just doesn't happen because there's so much need. But on some level, I can imagine what was going on with Esau that day. Out hunting, hoping to have something that he could prepare for his own meal, but not finding any game. Now, Scripture doesn't tell us how long he was out hunting looking for something, but clearly by the time he was just giving it up, he was beyond that point of missed lunch. He came and he found his brother, Jacob, making up some lentil stew. Oh, and that was the best stew he had ever smelled. So good that he was willing to trade his birthright for it. Now, it's a strange story, because we don't think of birthrights as something that you can trade, but in the day and age of this story, Esau, as the eldest son, stood to inherit everything that his father Isaac owned. Everything went to the eldest, you see. And he was willing to trade all of that for a bowl of lentil stew. That's pretty hungry. I can't imagine being that hungry. Though certainly in our world there are many people who are. Those who gather in refugee camps. Those who are daily going without. But for Esau that day, he was ready to make that trade. And we read this story and we see Jacob, the one who's been there cooking, the one who's been the less favored son, the younger son, the one who doesn't have anything going for him, as he happily trades a bowl of stew for everything that his brother would one day inherit. And I don't know if you see it the same way I always have, but I've always thought, what a jerk. You know, if my brother were to come out of the woods after hunting and he was hungry, I'd feed him. It would be that simple. There would be no trade involved. It would be a gift from one brother to another brother. Here, I've got what you need. Take it. But this is a story of origins in the Hebrew Scripture. We've had the stories of Abraham. We've had the stories of Isaac. And now we find Jacob and Esau, a splitting point, if you will, in the family tree. And the Jewish people trace their line through not Esau, but Jacob. And so this is a story of how it came to be that that younger brother, the one who had nothing going for him, became the next one in that line of the patriarchs. It's a story that the Jewish people have told for millennia, not as a celebration of nastiness, but as a celebration of craftiness. You see, when you're the downtrodden, when you're the second son, when you're the one who doesn't have the hunting skills, when you're the one that Dad doesn't love best, you need to look at things differently and do things differently. You have to do what it takes to survive. To us, it's a bit of a scandalous story when we see it that way. But that's the underlying meaning for it. Scandalous. You know, Jesus told scandalous stories too. We have today's parable of that sower who went out to sow, taking the seeds and casting them left and right, not caring where those seeds landed. Now, usually when we hear the stories of Jesus, those parables, we again tend to think of them as sweet little stories, as things that teach us about God. And you've got to hold your hands over your heart when you say that, because, you know, they just make us feel all warm and fuzzy. But this is not one of those stories. This is the story that when Jesus' hearers had been listening to it, their response would have been, "What kind of fool does that?" Spreading seed all over the place. Are any of you gardeners? Somebody's going to know. Okay, he's almost a gardener. You put down your violin and maybe you hoe a potato or something. A whole congregation of not really gardeners. Wow, that's weird. Well, let me tell you about my mother. And my mother is going to be watching this video on YouTube, so I need to be a little careful as I tell this story. My mother loved gardening. Still does, but she doesn't do it anymore. She's gotten a little bit older and she's moved into a community that doesn't have any dirt. But my mother loved gardening. And she used to send us kids out to garden. That's how my mother used to garden. You know, the weeding, the picking. She liked planting, though. That was her thing. And she used to say that she would put a $10 plant in a $20 hole. You know, when she was preparing the soil, she would put in the peat moss and the vermiculite and the fertilizer and all of that stuff and stick the plant in it, and those plants would go like gangbusters, just growing like crazy. Because my mother knew that you've got to prepare the soil if you want to have anything worth having. Now, my wife, who probably won't watch this sermon on YouTube, would you listen to your husband's sermon? No, you would not. But my wife, who is not going to watch this sermon, she's a master gardener. And she would also tell you that you have to prepare the soil, that you have to get it ready. And when she got her plot at the community garden, I loaded up more bags of composted manure than I thought would ever fit in the back of the Subaru. And she mixed it into the soil. She was just amazing with that. Well, this is the third year she's had the plot. And so this year, she didn't get around to starting until a little bit late. Well, actually, she didn't get around to starting until the person at the plot next to hers called and complained that it was just weeds. So my wife, just a couple weeks ago, starting late, went and she weeded everything. And then she took a couple of plants that she had picked up sort of secondhand and jammed them into the soil real fast. We're waiting to see what happens. I think something is going to grow. Probably some of the tomatoes. I keep telling her that she needs to plant asparagus, because that'll just keep going forever without tending it. It's the problem with a community garden clear across town. You can't take the same care that you can with a backyard garden. But I'm waiting to see what comes out of the garden this year. This sort of thrown together garden where I'm not even sure Kimberly knows what she planted, because she got a bunch of free plants. It'll be interesting. But the farmer did just the same thing, didn't he? Throwing the seed everywhere. He didn't know what was going to come up. Well, maybe he knew what, kind of. But he didn't care if it tried to come up in the middle of the road. Didn't care if it came up in a weedy patch. Didn't care if it came up in the good soil. And that's pretty scandalous. It's not what good gardeners do. What's with that sower? Well, as with so many of Jesus' parables about the realm of God, that sower is God. That sower is the one who spreads love willy-nilly. Let it land where it will. Let it spring up to the best it can. And maybe it will be a rich harvest. Maybe not. But you spread the love anyway. And I think there's a lesson for us in that. So often we try and interpret the parables as though they're about us. Oh, am I the good field? Am I the stony field? Am I the weedy patch? Well, I don't think that's the point. Honestly, I think that all of us are a little bit of each. You've got some fertile spots in you where God's love takes hold and grows, don't you? Don't answer that. You got some stony spots too, I expect. I know I do. Those places where God is trying to work and something in me isn't letting it. Don't answer that one either. There's those weedy parts too, where even though God's love is growing, is transforming, there's part of me that's working against that. I'm not even going to ask that question. That's our condition. We're all fields, stony, weedy, and fertile. And God's love has been broadcast, and all we can do is receive it. We can receive it with a prayer. A prayer that we might be fertile, a prayer that our weeds might be pulled out, our prayer that that stony section might indeed be better tended. But we receive it with a prayer. Now there's another way to look at this parable, of course, about how spreading the seed widely brings about unintended, blessed results, returning 30, 60, or 100-fold. And as a congregation, you're at a place now where you're beginning to broadcast some seed too. You're in this interim time when you're trying to figure out who you are, who you want to be, and who you want to have as your next pastor. Now, I know some of you are on the search committee. Yeah, God love you. I know some of you are not on the search committee. But you have some opportunities together. And I was hearing about this conversation that's going on about what you want to do, about this survey that you get a chance to fill out, to give an idea of where you would like to see this church heading. And as all of that comes in, as you start to put together your profile and figure out what that next step is going to look like and how God is going to bless you with your next pastor, I remind you to spread that seed as widely as possible. Don't narrow in your parameters so tightly that there's only one possible person on the planet that could ever be your pastor. By the way, Jesus isn't up for the job. Keep your minds and your hearts and your spirits open. Look for that one that God will bring to you, who may not be what you expect at all. That's always the joy of an interim period. It's the scary part too, but it's the joy of journeying through that field, looking for that match, waiting to find out who God's gift to you is, waiting to find out for whom you will also be a gift. And so just as that parable of Jesus was applicable so long ago to people with hungry hearts, it's applicable to us today. May you, as a congregation, be blessed in your journey. May we, as God's people, all be blessed, as together we find God's love springing up and bearing fruit in our lives. And in that blessing, may we turn to the world and offer it back 30, 60, or 100-fold.